Committee of Transport, Science and Technology to make his presentation. Thank you.
Mesdames, Mesdemoiselles,
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, I should like to apologize to you all because we were supposed to be presenting first. We did not do that because the documents were not translated in all the official languages of the African Union, so we apologize for that. I'm going to read to you the report of the workshop on e-governance entitled Challenges for Parliamentarians in Africa. It was a case study and also a sharing of experiences, and that happened on the 1st and 2nd of March 2016 in Committee Room 1 here at the Pan-African Parliament in Midrand. The context. Rule 28 of the Protocol of PAP says that the PAP must work in close collaboration with the parliaments of regional economic communities and any other national legislative organ. I think that you do know that. It is Rule 18. And it is in this context that the PAP, through its Committee on Agriculture, Industry, Communications, Energy and Sciences and Technology, organized a workshop on the 1st and 2nd of March 2016 on e-governance. Challenges of parliamentarians in Africa, a case study, etc. The workshop handled sharing experiences of certain countries having adopted e-governance and online services. Obviously, we started with welcome remarks. Members of the Committee on Agriculture, Industry, Communication, Sciences and Technology, Honorable Touré Daouda, your humble servant. In fact, it is Touré Daouda. Touré. We welcomed the members present at the workshop. We welcomed the experts as well, and we told them that it was necessary to adopt e-governance in order to improve governance on the African continent. We gave a brief summary at the beginning of the workshop about the experiences on e-governance. At the official opening, the chairperson joined us, and His Excellency Roger Nkoudou join us, the President of the Pan-African Parliament. His Excellency Roger Nkoudou welcomed all participants and expressed the fact that he was satisfied to see the commitment of the members in attending this conference despite their heavy schedule in their respective countries. In his intervention, he specified that it is only through good communications and collaboration strategies that are efficient with all stakeholders that PAP will be able to attain its objectives, adding that his bureau was delighted to help on this matter. Thank you very much, Mr. President. We are now going to go to the presentation of the sub-themes and the debate. The workshop was subdivided in 5 sections. Presentations given during these 5 sections were on the following subjects. 1. We will speak about the presentation of NEPAD concerning e-governance. We were visited by Dr. Towela Nyurenda Jere, representative of Information Technology of NEPAD. She gave a presentation on the way in which NEPAD views e-governance. She informed the members that the efficiency of e-governance and governance by internet, that was all linked to globalization. She told us that we live in a world where everything is online, and it requires that every single person be attentive to the way in which this issue is handled. She let the members know that the role of NEPAD was to facilitate and coordinate continental and regional.
Assurer de l'appui du NEPAD dans
أكدت الأعضاء
en estas áreas de
nécessité d'accélérer
to accelerate the rhythm of development, harmonization of legal and regulatory frameworks, awareness and capacity building that are imperative, political will that must be matched by investment, and driving the NEPAD's agenda hard to leverage African technical and financial resources. Secondly, we will speak about the presentation on e-council in Algeria. Abdelrazak Eni visited us, who is Director General of the Modernization of Documentation and Archives in the Ministry of Interior and Local Government in Algeria, explained how the systems are used in developing the online national identification registration in Algeria. He informed members that Algeria promotes training in internet services in schools, which has enabled them to have a large population which can now use e-services. Most of the programs for e-services are pioneered in schools, and thereafter they are rolled out in administration. He emphasized that in order for the continent to develop, there is need to benefit from the expertise of each and every one, and reiterated that Algeria was ready to share its experience with the rest of Africa. Thereafter, we had another presentation on online and distant learning, e-learning in other words. Another experience on online and distant learning was shared by Professor Amar Bala, who is a member of the Post and Telecommunications Regulatory Board and professor at the Advanced School of Computer Sciences of Algiers. Professor Bala outlined the process of how they handle e-learning in Algeria. He informed members that a big population which cannot make it to class enjoy the facility, and this has led to the increase in percentage of people who had access, and these people were informed of e-services, and e-learning is one of them. He informed members of the opportunities available in the National Computer School of Algiers, which African countries can use. He further urged the Pan-African Parliament through its members to carry the message to their national parliaments. He stressed the need to jump on the bandwagon to create collaborative e-learning projects on the continent. We then had a presentation on the challenges of e-commerce, and we spoke about the case of Tunisia. Mr. Hassan Drif, consultant, expert, and senior management in e-commerce and technology innovation in Tunisia, he is a director of a company, shared with the members how far Tunisia has developed its commercial sector by using e-services and the challenges the country is facing. Tunisia has more than 3,000 companies that do online business and trading. He said that in Tunisia they are emphasizing the use of electronic payments and also encouraged business people to use e-commerce when doing business. He pointed out that the state contributes towards the businesses of people who engage in e-commerce as an incentive to encourage people to use e-commerce. However, he mentioned the following challenges: limited infrastructure. He urged the African Union to help with building infrastructure in order to improve and promote e-commerce on the African continent, whereby products from, example, Chad, Algeria, could be made known outside Africa. Popularization of e-commerce. E-commerce needs to be popularized so that it can attract more people who commit to using it. Thereafter, there was a presentation on the synthesis on national policies in the ICT field. Mr. August Dianke from the AU Commission gave an overview on national ICT policies. He defined the ICT policies as measures and courses of actions adopted by governments to address ICT issues or strategies developed and put in place by public bodies that will enable them to transform their economies into information and knowledge economies. He highlighted the national ICT policy structure to include their vision, goals and objectives, timetable, resources available, and monitoring, evaluation, and review. He gave the example of Seychelles as one of the countries with a national ICT policy. He informed members that African governments are at different levels of establishing policy instruments and legislative frameworks. He further pointed out that while many countries have suggested legislations, the level of implementation of ICT policies, both at national and regional levels, remain low. We also had a presentation on parliamentary communication. Effective parliamentary communication was cited as a key in promoting e-services. This was highlighted in the presentation on parliamentary communication, which was done by Honorable Professor Mohamed Tayeb Lasri from Algeria, who is here. He is an expert. He informed members that there is a need to have a communication plan where we can communicate efficiently and in a transparent manner. He explained the rules of communication vis-à-vis a communication in Parliament. He put emphasis on the following: the type of communication from parliaments, most especially when there are two sides, i.e. the opposition and the ruling party, means and ways of communicating on social network, the necessary tools required, and how parliaments would wish to share with the governments. The need to have a communications policy in all parliaments, and that parliamentary communication is an obligation that should be fast, speedy, simple, and personalized, and should put the parliament to the fore. Maybe there are members of parliament here who have Twitter accounts. Anyone? Maybe 2 or 3. 8 out of 100. Thank you. You see that there are not many parliamentarians here that have access to social media. Is there anyone here who has a website here? You have a website? Thank you. 6 people, maybe 9. I think that everyone here should have a Facebook page. It is mandatory. You have Facebook accounts, don't you? Yes. Thank you. Very well. That was to say that parliamentarians do not really use social media that are very important instruments. We will go back to that. Then we had the presentation on the experience of Estonia in the field of electronic governance. Estonia has 1,300,000 inhabitants. It's a very modern country. It's a small country in the cold Nordic neighborhood. We had a presentation from Mr. Ari Laponen on the experience of Estonia. It's a small country. He informed members that Estonia has an internet penetration of 78%, and I repeat, 78%, with a fully functional e-government infrastructure. He said that they have a 16-year experience of e-service providing, and since 2005 they have been using i-voting in all elections, and 96% of personal income tax statements are submitted online. He further informed members that they have achieved this because they used education as a vehicle to enable them to reach the stage where they are by supporting ICT in schools. Mr. Laponin informed members that we are confronted with a new reality where ICT usage is not a hobby nor a tool, but a major building block of that reality of daily life. He urged countries to work on new principles in order to meet the challenges. After the workshop, the members gave the following recommendations.
Mindful of the delay shown by Africa, despite having a high ICT penetration, is lagging behind, and there is a low ICT penetration. And mindful of the lack of interconnection infrastructure among African states, mindful of the absence of an African comprehensive policy, the Committee on Transport, Industry, Communications, Energy, Science and Technology recommends as follows. In the aim of benefiting from the experience of countries such as Algeria, Tunisia and Estonia, with great headway in the modernization of their administrations and taking into account the role of the African Union in the coordination and harmonization of ICT policies at the regional and national levels, bilateral and multilateral cooperation must be encouraged and supported to take as reference the practical experiences of these countries in terms of e-governance, so as to help the countries lagging behind in the field to develop the analog tools for an electronic and modern administration. Taking up again the former project of creating the African Virtual University, which was abandoned, and making it as a reality, as many of the African countries have set up the ICT infrastructures that did not exist when the project was launched. The third recommendation is that the African continent is lagging considerably behind in terms of trade flow and particularly inter-African trade. African products and services lack visibility, and African SMEs are not capable of standing up to competition from the other continents. African governments absolutely must help their local firms move on to the digital economy. The promotion of African products can succeed only through the creation of online marketplaces for made-in-Africa products. The fourth recommendation. The Pan-African Parliament is called upon to advocate effectively to the government authorities of their respective countries to obtain the signature and ratification of the AU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, and the development of national legislations on cybersecurity and creation at the national and regional levels. We need to put in place computer emergency response teams and computer security incident response teams. 5. National parliaments, and mainly the Pan-African Parliament, should develop a real parliamentary communication policy. Indeed, for all contemporary parliaments, whatever their age and the extent of the means they can use, Communication is a democratic and institutional imperative. The public demands more access to all the government institutions, including the Parliament, and wants them to be transparent and efficient and accountable. In order to have an effective parliamentary communication, national parliaments are invited to obtain a web portal for a higher visibility of their parliamentary activities by the end of 2016. I emphasize, by the end of 2016, we should have web portals in our parliaments. Yes, we can. We can do it. Yes, we can, as indicated by Barack Obama. We should do this by the end of 2016. To conclude, the chairperson, on behalf of the members, I thanked the members, the presenters, for their presentations, and also thanked the Pan-African Parliament which organized the workshop. They promised to follow closely on the recommendations they come up with during the workshop, and to also ensure that PAP organizes a continental conference on e-governance, which will involve people from all over the continent. Also guests from around the world who have an experience on e-governance. The chairperson also thanked the members who made an effort in attending the workshop and urged them to share the information they got with the people in their respective countries. I hereby submit. That's, ladies and gentlemen, a brief report on the workshop that was held on the 1st and 2nd of March. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. The general debate is open. I have a list of 19 speakers. Honorable Martin Niteretse, Honorable Bisiri Semira, Honorable Enasien Niarokondo, Honorable Abdullah Barkat Ibrahim, Honorable Sekou Fantamadi Traore, Honorable Mohamed Tayeb Laskri, Honorable Bashir Ali Mohamed El Batani, Honorable Noé Bonigaba, Honorable Eugène Fala Parka, Honorable Evelyn Biote, Honorable Zalikato Diallo, Honorable Donion Kone, Honorable Ali Awadala Ali, Honorable Paramount Chief Baikur Kanagbaro, Honorable Aissatou Saud Diawara, Honorable Jacqueline Mohuyon Gayere, Honorable Hashim Idris, Honorable Dr. Bernadette Lahaye, Honorable Abdurazak Saad Namdas. I give the floor to the first speaker in my list, who is Honorable Martin Nitereste from Burundi.
My name for speaking in this debate.
On vous inclut, madame, ça n'a pas de, il n'y a pas de problème. C'est une...
No problem. You will take note of your name. No problem. You are now in the list.
Merci. 20 inscrits. Le dernier dans la liste, c'est l'honorable Kéliane Santos de l'Afrique du Sud. Oui, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Excellence, Honorable Président.
You have the floor, sir. Thank you. I thank the presenter for his presentation. My commentary will raise a concern with the presentation made. The development of ICTs in Africa is the real hope of everyone. But I notice that we have a problem in some African countries where we notice repeated power cuts. I wonder how we are going to develop ICTs in the absence of power supply in the continent. There was a presentation by Minister Borot with regard to COP21. We had a number of promises. COP21, the conclusions of COP21 were in favor of the development of the electricity and energy sector in Africa. I think it would be better, Mr. President, to follow up the issue of electrification in Africa. All the resources are there, but implementation is problematic. Thank you, dear colleague. I give the floor to Honorable Bissiri Semera from Burkina Faso. My name is Sirima Bissiri. Sirima Bissiri. That's always my name is always an issue. It's Sirima. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleague. I give the floor to Honorable Ignatienne from Rwanda. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the chairperson of the committee. I would say that the use of e-services in our parliament is starting slowly but surely. With regard to recommendation number 3, which talks about trade flows and inter-African trade, I think that the problem is not the manner in which people can sell products. The problem is that we do not produce enough. E-services can help us modernize companies. I don't know any single country in Africa which has a product surplus and does not have markets. I'm not certain. But what is lacking in Africa is the following. We tend to live with less, whereas we can produce more and enrich our economies. With these modern tools, we can produce more, and the market is tremendous. We have 1 billion consumers in Africa. I may be wrong. We have a large size of consumers. Let's produce more, create trade flows. But we need to produce more to meet the needs of African consumers. I thank you, dear colleague. I give the floor to Honorable Abdullah Barkat Ibrahim from Djibouti. Thank you. I pass. Now I give the floor to Honorable Sekou Fantamadi Traoré from Mali. Thank you. She's not in the chamber. I give the floor to Honorable Mohamed Taib Laskri from Algeria. Thank you, Mr. President. Of course, I'm a member of this committee. I put my name in the list to consolidate what Honorable Daouda said in his presentation in presenting the report of the committee. In the previous days, we talked about corruption, mismanagement, and the need for good governance in African countries. This is a very powerful tool that will enable us to fight against red tape and bureaucracy and corruption. This tool will enable us to highlight good governance within national governments. In fact, African states and governments are called upon to modernize their administration, to be closer to the citizens and to get rid of red tape. Governments must earn the trust of citizens with more transparency in management. As rightly indicated by my colleague Daouda Touré, Africa is lagging behind. Africa is lagging behind on the basis of a classification established by the United Nations. This classification takes into account the index of good governance. The first country in Africa is lagging behind at the world level. I think that Seychelles is classified as number 1 in Africa, or Cape Verde, I'm not sure. Each African country is moving forward, but each African country is moving forward on the basis of its own pace and on the basis of its own national policy. But we also indicated that there is the absence of a continental policy in the area of using ICTs and e-management and the modernization of our administrations. As I indicated, each country in Africa is moving forward on the basis of its own pace. Some countries, some governments put in place ministries of ICT, such as the case of Algeria or others. But there are others who do not have such ministries. We need to have a national policy, and we need to have a ministry that is in charge of ICTs in the country to carry out a national policy. The case of Estonia was raised. I would like to raise the case of Lithuania, a very tiny country indeed. Lithuania is a very small country, and it is used as a reference by the most developed countries. In its constitution, it is clearly indicated that access to internet is for all and free. So there is this provision in the constitution, free internet access. The last issue is that the parliamentary democratic approach is important, and parliaments are accountable to citizens. If we want parliaments to be visible, all parliamentary activities, irrespective of the nature of the activity, must be accessible online, and in this way the citizens can participate and can express their opinion. The solution is clear. We need to use ICTs, and that's the solution, and that's the way forward to make parliamentary activities visible. We also want PAP to be the best example in parliamentary communication. We don't simply need to communicate, but we need to communicate well. I thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. I give the floor to Bashir Ali Mohammed Al-Batani from Sudan. You have the floor, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the presenter of the report. This report is very important indeed, because it is related to the development of the continent. Mr. President, dear colleagues, we are endeavoring to enhance productivity and benefit from the major resources available to us in Africa. And to do so, we need to compete in marketing our products around the world. Electronic trade is now an important need, and we need to trade, we need to sell our products around the world, and we need to develop e-governance, and to be able to do so, we need to develop our own networks. This is related to globalization and the development of ICTs. Therefore, it is urgent to provide the new technologies and we need to build our capacity, the capacity of the people who use these technologies. Therefore, I see, Mr. President, that PAP should adopt a detailed and specific program to assist African countries technically and financially in this area. I also think that there is a need for our Union to adopt a program to lift the boycott against African countries, such as the case of Sudan. This boycott is preventing African countries from accessing new technologies and to deal with international banks. I thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Now I give the floor to Honorable Noé Mbonigaba. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. I thank the presenter of this report. As a participant in that workshop, I will wish to contribute to some to the understanding of some challenges. The first challenge is the presentation itself. It deals with awareness building in the area of ICTs. But I notice that the presentation is very relevant, and the participants in that workshop were not many. I advocate here that PAP ensures that such reports, which have a continental importance, have to be useful to all parliamentarians. The workshop should aim at attracting more parliamentarians. I also wish to suggest the circulation of the presentations electronically. Another challenge, Mr. President, is electronic voting. If ICTs have to be developed in Africa, and as indicated by the theme, there is the issue of elections, and these elections are raising a great deal of litigation, and we have not been able to settle the issue so far. Another challenge highlighted is distance education. Education is at the heart of development, but for the time being, Africa is witnessing a deficit in the area of virtual education. We advocate here that PAP contributes to the development of e-services. But for that, we need more sustainable energy. I thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear colleague. I give the floor to Honorable Eugene Falaparakar from Liberia.
Mr. President, thank you very much for giving me the floor. I would like to compliment Mr. Daouda Touré, who presented, Touré, sorry, who presented very well on the concept of electronic governance. I think the issue of electronic governance is key in the advancement of our society. There is no doubt. But the only deficit we have is that Africa, as a continent, is still lagging far, far behind in terms of information technology. For example, in the Western world, if you went ahead to campaign on the net, most of the electorate will listen to the messages. But in African countries where most of the population is rural, if you depend on Facebook, Twitter to run your campaign, at the end of the day, you'll be a very big loser. You have to roll your sleeves to trek on foot from hamlet to hamlet, from village to village, so that you can win. This is a very good concept. In fact, in my place, there was a fellow who came from the West who wanted to be an MP. And he went with his laptop and projector from village to village. You know, at the end of the day, the technology was strange to the people. They could not conceptualize what he was talking about. At the end of the day, he lost big time. And so, electronic governance is good, but I think it will take Africa a long time. We need to invest in it. For example, in this chamber, in this hallowed chamber, oftentimes we have voluminous documents. I mean, I feel so sorry for us. If we had tablets, for example, placed at every desk, at the end of the day, if there are documents, those documents are placed straight in our tablets and we access it right here. And it will cut down, on the finances, and it will cut down on labor. And so I think if we are talking about electronic governance, we need to start it right here. We as leaders of Africa. The other thing that I would like to talk about has got to do...
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I would like to talk about is the issue of education. Education is very important. And nowadays, instead of ordering books, that will cost you a lot to carry. For example, if you are going back in your country, you can use the net. You can use electronic libraries. Because the libraries we have having books on the shelf are archaic. They are antiquated. But in Africa, we don't have energy. Energy is a problem. How many countries in Africa have stable energy? That is a problem. So for us to realize electronic governance, we need to invest in energy, we need to invest in education, and we need to spend some money. And so most of the monies that are going through illicit financial flows by our leaders in other countries, we can save those money to invest in the education of our children. And if we do that, the better it is for us to realize electronic governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I give the Butoi from Burundi. Not in the chamber.
Merci.
Thank you, Honorable President, for giving me the floor. Just like my predecessors, I wish to congratulate the presenter. Honorable President, when I read the report, I thought that this would deal with the strategy of how to benefit from ICTs as Pan-African Parliament. I'm sorry, I will have to repeat what my predecessor emphasized. I asked the question of why not benefit from ICTs so that we can use intranet and internet. The papers we received should help PAP to provide us with computers and access to the internet. I see that half of MPs have their own laptops, and we could have received the documents via the net. So, we could save on this and do something else. I wish to seize this opportunity to share the experience of my country, Burundi. We have an ICT ministry, but we have this problem of power supply. Our parliament, our Senate, and our ministries have portals and websites. We are in social networks. We have Twitter accounts and Facebook pages. We are also on YouTube and Flickr. So we are fairly advanced. The mobilization of parliamentarians needs to be undertaken. And as a member of PAP, we need to be an example so that MPs in our countries could emulate this example. The use of social networks will help us more. We can communicate more information about our meetings, and this will have a major impact, I think, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the Honourable Zalikato Diallo from Guinea-Conakry. Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. I would also like to congratulate Daouda Touré for an excellent presentation, especially on a theme that is so important at the moment in the world as we know it. I would have liked to have participated in this workshop, but unfortunately in our committee we had another program, and so I would like to support my colleague from Burundi to say that these kinds of workshops should be open to all parliamentarians. Today, we are evolving in a world where everything is linked. And this means that sooner or later, e-governance, the parliament online, all government services being online will be absolutely essential. And so we need to make sure that we are ready for this so that we are at the same level as other countries. Because on the international level, it shows that the first country in terms of e-services in Africa is Cape Verde, followed by the Seychelles. So a lot of us have to catch up. And I had some questions on the strategies so that African countries can reach the same level as other countries in terms of ICTs. And I would like to add to what was already said in the presentation. I think that the PAP needs to urge national governments to include the strengthening of capacities of members of parliament in terms of ICTs so that they can use e-government services and promote them. We will use less paper and save our forests. I would like to give the floor to the Honourable Digon Kone from Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to congratulate the speaker on an excellent presentation and for all the work that was done by this committee. However, Mr. President, I was expecting for the committee to give us more detail on the strategies to follow with regards to ICTs. What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? And what are the best practices? How e-services have helped in terms of fighting corruption and other important subjects. This workshop could have served as an experience sharing opportunity for people to share the experiences of their governments. But I would like to know what are the measures that have been put in place by African countries in terms of investment, infrastructure. We talk about optical fiber, and what have these countries done in terms of integrating the ICT technologies and offerings of their countries? And we spoke about the example of Tunisia. The other concern that I have is that I have the same dream as other people, such as Emlyn, such as my colleague from Liberia. Maybe we ate the same thing yesterday, that we are dreaming about the same things. But in my dream, I see... and I would just like to say that if there are any similarities with any parliamentarian here, it's a complete coincidence. In my dream, there is a parliament that starts an hour late, where we have a ton of paper that we receive. And I can tell you, I'm not taking this paper with me because otherwise I will be overweight in terms of my luggage. And in this dream, somebody woke up and decided to put all of these documents on the internet, or an intranet system, like my previous colleague said. And I would like to congratulate the Honourable Mwanda, who every day sends us reports and updated documents via email. Sometimes it's a day or so late, because sometimes we are in the middle of debating a topic when we receive the documents. But it's never too late to do a good job. Thank you very much. Please, if you would allow me to finish, Mr. President. In my country, we don't believe that dreams are impossible. And, Mr. President, I would like that the chairperson of the committee tells me that my dream can be turned into a reality. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Honourable Ali Awadallah Ali from Sudan. Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to congratulate the Speaker for an excellent presentation, and I would also like to congratulate the committee for the hard work that they did and for organizing this workshop. We said that electronic governance is achievable, and they spoke about the experiences of various countries who are already using e-governance and how this can be done in our countries. And there are some countries that use e-services in education, health, and other areas, e-trade, e-commerce. And I think it's time that the African continent is able to offer these services online as well. And we have started in terms of our government to offer this in terms of creating portals where information can be obtained, where e-services can be obtained. And these portals facilitate communication between governments and the people. And this is if the portals contain information that is pertinent and that interests the people. And information can be categorized and made easy to access. And in terms of the services, there are services where you can make easy payments, and this will facilitate relationships between governments and the people. And even in terms of the parliaments and the structures of government, we recommend that e-services be used to reduce the use of paper, etc. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to the Honourable Paramount Chief Baikur Kanabaro from Sierra Leone.
Je donne la parole à l'honorable.
Give the floor to the Honorable Assitou Sow Diawara from Senegal. I give the floor to the Honorable Jacqueline Muhangire from Rwanda. Jacqueline, you have the floor.
President, first of all, I wish to thank you, Mr. President, and the entire Bureau of Pan-African Parliament to facilitate this workshop on this important topic. I also wish to thank the chairperson of our committee for the excellent presentation on behalf of the committee members. As we all know, the importance of science and technology is fundamental for a knowledge-based economy and economic transformation. Mr. President, as we are moving towards a world where everything will be online, this requires everyone to be mindful on how to deal with it. Just to share one of the experience of my country, on the One Laptop per Child program, this program has shown that the introduction of technology in primary school, it allows primary school students early access to computer skills, early access to computer understanding and knowledge on specific subjects like science, languages, and social sciences, online research. Digital transformation can really help in efficient and effective service delivery, be it in education sector, in the business sector, in the e-commerce sector, in the healthcare, in the fiscal sector like fiscal declarations, in the governance in general. Mr. President, through our regional economic communities, member states should be encouraged to adopt a common regional telecommunication framework. For example, adoption of a one network area and share the benefits, for example, of a fiber optic. It can cut the financing investment. Member states should also continue to share positive steps in this new development of information and technology for an efficient and effective economic transformation. There is urgent need for African members to have a global policy and to harmonize our legal framework and the regulatory frameworks. As parliamentarians, we should continue the advocacy in increasing awareness and capacity building in collaboration with different stakeholders in this sector of ICT, information and communication and technology. Mr. President, allow me to also to join my voice for my colleagues to thank the administration of PAP for the improvement in PAP administration, for the submission to members online through the online of documents some days before the debate before the House. This last 2 weeks, I think we received documents from Mr. Jose Mangwanda some days, 2 days or 1 day before. I think we should encourage this.
1 more minute, Madam MP.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we have no choice. As it have been said by the chairperson of this committee, Africa, the penetration of ICT is high from the foreign countries, but Africa is still lagging behind. This was a workshop it was a kind of test, but it is not the end. We will continue join our efforts to explore this sector in order to see how we can really transform African economy and really to share the benefits of this motto for one voice, one Africa, one voice. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to the Honorable Hashim Idris from Sudan. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would also like to thank the chairperson of the committee and the committee members for their hard work. This is a very important theme, and it has become inevitable that we all make efforts, whether we like it or not, to transform the way we operate and move towards making technological progress. And even if in the report they say that Africa is lagging behind in terms of e-governance, we need to ask our governments to create strategies to put e-services and e-governance in place as soon as possible so that we can catch up in this field. And in terms of technological means, we need to use e-governance and the importance of e-governance to put pressure on the government to put these services in place. And we need to use these services. Some use these e-services as a means of war in terms of depriving certain members of their community and their society from certain services and from access to these e-governance services. And we have to move forward in this respect. I would like to give you an example. When we deprive governments or we impose sanctions on certain governments for decades, like what happened to our country, where we deprive governments from getting this kind of technology and sharing it with their populations. But despite all of this, our government managed to put these services in place. As my colleague from Sudan said earlier, we created an electronic network that has managed to contribute to us collecting taxes online and in achieving a 40% increase in taxes collected. Thank you for the extra time, Mr. President. This is why recommendations have been made by the committee, but what are the mechanisms that will allow us to put these strategies in place? The first way is through assistance by the Pan-African Parliament and through the will of our national governments. But I think that a study is necessary on this theme and how we can put these strategies in place, how we can prepare the necessary conditions to put these services in place. And I think that we also need an evaluation of the current situation in Africa. I'd like to give the floor to Honourable Bernadette Lahaye from Sierra Leone.
Mr. President, I'm compelled to take the floor on this very important topic. Being the chairperson for this committee for 3 years and also the rapporteur for this committee for 3 years. That was until my election as vice president. Mr. President, under my chairmanship and leadership of that committee, we did have a workshop on e-government and e-parliament. It was very well attended. We brought in experts. At the end of the day, we came up with certain salient recommendations. Of course, one of the recommendations was to widen the scope of this conference by making it into an international conference. We did our best to host an international conference, but our best was not good because it has serious financial implications. This was how we decided that this time we will have the same conference, but this time also increase the scope in terms of the resource persons. You can see that somebody was brought from Estonia to also share with us their experience in e-governance. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, I want to recommend to the chairman to look back on some of the recommendations of the earlier workshop. Of course, I can see that we have started implementing some of them. Today, if you see that we have increased our visibility in terms of media, especially of this conference. It was as a result of that conference. We have put in place a senior media and communication officer, which was not done before, and we are now seeing the changes. Of course, we need to do more. And I want to assure that very soon this parliament will go e-parliament. We are working towards the provision of tablets for all members of parliament here. But at least, for a start, you are now having your documents sent to you, sometimes earlier, sometimes a bit late, based on also challenges of this parliament. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, for you to go e-government and e-parliament, you have to have certain basic imperatives. Africa still don't, most African countries don't have those imperatives. These are some of the imperatives. You must have communication and IT strategy. Most parliaments and most countries don't have strategy. You must have energy that is reliable. Africa still enjoys less than 10% of energy. We must have our fiber optics.
1 more minute.
We must have our fiber optics up and running. We must ensure that we migrate from analog to digital. We must upgrade our ICT equipment to the state of the art in order for it to carry or to take us through. So I want to say that it is important. We, in this parliament, have been implementing some of the recommendations. But let us, I agree, still strive to have this international conference that we decided to have and we still have not had. It is important. We can mobilize the service providers in ICT, the regulatory frameworks, and all of them so that they will all put some money into this international conference. It is in the interest of all of us to have this international conference. So I want to thank the chair for this meeting for having carried on some of the recommendations of the previous workshop. And I stand to say that I'm ready and willing for us to give all the support to this committee so that we can have that international conference. But also, please go back to our elections so that we can see which ones have been implemented and which ones needs to be implemented so that we can add it to the recommendations and resolutions that you have proffered, which are very good. I thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the Honorable Abdul Razak Said Namdas from Nigeria.
Mr. President, first, let me not sound very pessimistic. I want to say that we have a very, very big problem in our hands, and I'm saying it very seriously. But let me begin by giving you a quotation from one of our African leaders who says that where the modern world is moving to the moon, Africans are yet to get to the villages. This is to explain to you the quantum of problem we have in Africa. And I must tell you very sincerely, I'm sorry to say it, that for us to have any change in e-governance, every decision we take in the parliament, whatever decision we take, it has to be, we have to have the political will of our head of states and presidents of our various nations. In Africa, 60% of our leaders are within the ages of 70 and above. They are not even electronic compliant. Some had their educations by cramming. Some got books. They are yet to even agree that this electronic governance is in order. And sincerely speaking, until we involve the youths of this nation, of Africa, in governance, we will continue to debate here, organize workshops, travel to USA, go to United Kingdom. You will come back and you will not have, most of our leaders, to be sincere, even political leaders, our elected, how many of us have Facebook accounts, have Twitter, how many of us can even use the computer? I want to say, and I'm very serious, that for us to move forward as a continent, we have to give education, e-governance, computer education at all levels. Ensure that our youth participate from primary schools to the universities so that people can be actively involved in e-education. I have been a journalist for quite over 15 years, and I know what I'm talking about. I know for sure that even when you meet some leaders, they don't even know how to operate ordinary handset. They will rely on their aides. this computer. So we don't even have secrets in Africa. Because whatever our leaders do, all their aides are aware of what is happening. So these are issues. But I believe that hopefully in future we may be able to get there. But we have to start very well. Like Doctor said too, we have the issue of power. We need to work on power. In Africa, in my country too, we are very populous, over 170 million people. I tell you that less than 30 or 40 million people have access to power. And this is very serious. And this, I think, until our leaders address issues like this, we will continue to remain here. Thank you to say that in PAP, I saw in the last budget that there is an attempt that some of this obsolete equipment will be replaced. And I hope when I come next session, I will operate electronically. Thank you and God bless you.
Merci.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to the Honourable Kerian Santos from South Africa.
Mr. President, when I'm listening to my colleagues speak, I realize how privileged I am to be a member of Parliament for the South African Parliament. Because we, when you're talking about some of the problems, I honestly cannot identify with it. Simply because in the fourth Parliament, we had already started the whole e-governance system. The Parliament of South Africa has a fantastic website. All members of Parliament are profiled on that website. The policies, the legislation, everything is there, and we refer to ourselves as a people's parliament. So our biodata is there, what we say in Parliament is there, it's there for the public out there to view. We also have what is called live video and audio streaming. So anyone from any part of the country who has got good signal, good internet, or access to a cell phone can listen to the debates live. Now, when South Africa went the e-route, we realized that many of our senior MPs didn't even know how to switch a computer on. So a separate ICT unit was set up in Parliament to help every single member of Parliament to set their computer up, to teach them how to use it, and how to send an email, how to receive an email. And we have a help desk, so if anything goes wrong, you just phone your help desk and they will either guide you over the telephone or they will come and do it. We also have a video conferencing facility, so it saves on costs if members want to be part of a committee and you can't all fly in just for the day. So we have a video conferencing room, and via your computer you can then Skype and do what you need to do. One of the speakers earlier referred to how much of paper we have, and we're going to be having a debate on climate change this afternoon. And I think we must do two things in this Parliament. I'll bring it up later in the debate. One is our carbon footprint. The other is how many forests do we use every time this Parliament sits. So it's good that we've started receiving our documents. I hear members saying we need laptops. If your Parliament hasn't provided for it, maybe the Pan-African Parliament should look at that. But before I conclude, lastly and most importantly, the Pan-African Parliament has got to come up with a social media policy. As you well know, people have... One more minute. Thank you, sir. As you well know, people have Twitter accounts, they have Facebook accounts. But when you're a member of Parliament, you are no longer have a private view. Everything is public, and you're either a member of Parliament representing the Parliament of the country, or you live in, or you are the Pan-African Parliament. Then what you tweet and what you put on Facebook has got to be appropriate. It cannot violate the code of conduct or the policies of this Parliament. So I think it is imperative, Mr. President, one of the recommendations that was made, that we add that the Pan-African Parliament comes up with a social media policy. In conclusion, Madam Lahai, you're talking about an international conference. Let's start with the needs analysis here first. Rather than inviting someone from Estonia, find out what the needs are in this parliament, and then design a conference to address those needs. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. To give the floor to Honorable Debo Akanda Ignace of the DRC.
Honorable President.
Honorable President, thank you so much for the floor. It is quite difficult to make a comment now after the brilliant comments and remarks that have been made. However, I should like to add my grain of salt to this debate concerning new information technologies. I have heard about the internet, intranet, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but Mr. President, we need to find out what the needs are. We need to also look after forecasts and do forecasts of what our needs are. The vision for tomorrow is leads to the fact that it is imperative to think of people who live with disabilities. When we speak about intranet and internet, we are talking about people who can see properly or who use glasses to see. But what about those who are visually challenged, people who live with disabilities? What are we going to do about these people if today at the Pan-African Parliament and out of solidarity with these people, what are we going to do about them if they are visually challenged? We really need to think about these people. That is African solidarity. That is a matter of humanity. I should like to conclude by suggesting, Mr. President, and I am delighted to hear that the chairperson of the Committee on Transport no, it's not a Committee on Transport, it's the Committee on Gender Equality, Youth, and People with Disabilities. I should like to suggest that we should amend this by saying people with disability, by saying people living with disabilities. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleague. Please allow me to echo what has just been said in this debate that is of utmost importance. First of all, I should like to ask the clerk's office to send this report to each and every one of you. You will read it. It is not a confidential report. It is a report on the situation of media at the Pan-African Parliament. And the report starts following the request of Honorable Roger Nkodo-Dang, the President of the Pan-African Parliament. A mission of the African Union spent 4 days here from 12th to 16th of February. The objective of the mission was to assess the situation in the Pan-African Parliament and to see how we could integrate that within an e-conference system. It's not a very long report, but the first conclusions that were reached in the report were that this chamber does not allow us anymore to adapt modern instruments because the instruments that we have are obsolete. The report also had the objective of putting up screens here to monitor speaking time and also to install an e-voting system. This work was supposed to finish 15 days before this session. We have had a pledge of 300 laptops from the World Bank, and this pledge was supported by the African Union Commission, and that's why the mission came here. But the people who came here said that it would be very expensive to do this work here because we are in temporary premises. That is not the problem. The problem is that these installations that were suggested by the World Bank via the African Union, we did not receive them on time because the team said that 30 days were needed to install all the necessary equipment. The Bureau really wishes to decrease the volume of paper that we are faced with every day. And I should like to ask the clerk to send you this report to see where our discussions have led us concerning the Internet and e-services within this Parliament. Secondly, I would wish that during our next session that the Minister Jean-Louis Borloo will tell us about the follow-up of Energy for All in Africa project. I say that because when we speak here, we don't really realize that what is a major handicap for us is energy. I am not ashamed to say when I am in my village, you cannot reach me. There is no electricity. So it's a real problem for us. I think that the basis of this is to focus on energy and electricity. Mrs. Kellyan has just emphasized the fact that we need to learn how to use computers and instruments and equipment. When I was at the summit, there was a laptop in front of me, and even to use it myself, I had a few problems because all documents are on the laptop. So I should like to echo Honorable Kellyan to highlight the fact that training in this field is so important. I wanted to say that information technology and communication technology is of utmost importance because if we had e-voting here, we would gain an enormous amount of time. And finally, I wanted to talk about the Panama Papers. I think that it is thanks to information and communication technology that these papers have come to bear. And there's also the issue of voting. In my village, I cannot vote electronically, but perhaps those who have this facility could do it. And even e-voting necessitates the training of citizens. So I think that the debate today emphasizes the fact that we are here and we need to learn, and we also need to bear in mind future generations, train them so that they are able to use all necessary equipment. I wanted to say that the Parliament is on this, and I wanted really to call upon everyone to accelerate the installation of this equipment. We need to buy 2 screens, and very soon with that we can be able to control the speaking time in Parliament. Only 2 screens. We can start with that. So, dear colleagues, this report is very important for us, and since there are no further comments, I would like to invite Jean-Louis Borloo at the next session so that he can give us an idea of how far this project has reached. During the last summit, the President of Guinea-Conakry was the spokesperson for the follow-up on the energy project. So I think that they are working very hard with the Minister Jean-Louis Borloo, because when I was in Europe recently, we had a conference on this subject, and we raised this issue with the European Parliament so that the European Parliament could force states to contribute to this endeavor. Thank you very much. And now I should like to invite Mr. Daouda Touré to respond to the issues raised. Honorable Touré, you have the floor.
Je voudrais commencer par...
I should like to start by saying to Honorable Abdul Razak from Nigeria that we must not be pessimistic. We will get there. You know, when a cellular telephone system started in Africa, we never thought that we could use this technology in our villages. You can see that many activities take place in villages using GSMs, and the youth today use the internet more and more, because what is referred to as the old people, that's us, we can be sometimes overwhelmed by all these developments. I should like to thank everyone for all their contributions. And I would like to attempt to respond to the few issues raised and concerns mentioned. Let me begin by responding to Eugene Falakpakar from Liberia, who says that we must be an example in the Pan-African Parliament. Yes, if we do not consider this issue seriously, we will be lagging behind. We have already missed the Industrial Revolution, and we cannot miss the electronic revolution. If we miss it, we are dead. And we will just be here passive, and we really need to do every single thing possible to advance this development and do advocacy. Start with yourselves within your national assemblies so that all necessary equipment and systems can be an example. This assembly must be an example, and we need a little bit of time so that the Pan-African Parliament becomes an e-Parliament by 2017, Mr. President. Let me respond to Honorable Dognon, who was speaking about his dream. And I think that this dream is possible. You know that good things are always difficult to materialize. But at the African Union, for example, we speak about regional interconnection. Maybe some of you know about it. I know that the Vice President worked on that, on interconnection between Central African countries. The World Bank, ADB, IUT, and the Islamic Bank have financed projects on interconnection, with also optic fiber project. The idea was to better implement interconnection within Africa. In Central Africa, they have what they call a Central African backbone. And the idea is that all countries of Central Africa must be connected and have access to the underground network. And that is done from the Cameroonian cities. There was approximately $400 million dedicated to this project. There was also the RCIP project for East and Southern Africa. $424 million was invested for these kinds of projects in these countries, and I think that Mrs. Bernadette Lahaye has worked on this project as well. And then there was $300 million invested in 2011, and that is 8,000 kilometers of optic fiber cable. You know that Morocco and Tunisia have their own systems. And I think that Africa is doing something, and we deserve to be optimistic. I cannot answer everyone's questions, but one computer per child, that was mentioned. That is what we should do. Africa has resources. Our countries have resources. We only need political will. We can give a computer to every child in every school. We know that corruption needs to be eliminated, and if that happens, we could give computers to children, but 70% of Africans live without electricity, and this is what we must work on. Africa's electrification must go together, hand in hand, with the access to e-services, to the e-services environment. It has to go together. In certain villages, you cannot even buy airtime for your cellular phone. So we need to rethink this e-environment. We need perhaps to use renewable energies, solar energy. We have solar energy in Africa. We need to come up with strategies that must force our countries to go to the electronic revolution. And I said earlier, if we miss that electronic revolution, since we missed the industrial revolution, it is a matter of survival. I thank you very much for all your